All right, Zach, thanks for chatting with me about your decision-making process, something that we're very passionate about. I wonder if you could just start by telling me a little bit about like why you created this doc, how it came to be in the first place.
Yeah, so this doc was partially born from Luxury Presence is completely a remote company. So, remote, we went remote during the pandemic, stayed remote and continue to stay remote, and that's our plan. So we do a lot of work asynchronously, which means we have to be able to communicate via writing very well. And I'm not somebody that loves reading long documents, especially when there's a lot of background about, why a decision was being made and all these things. I just want to get to the point of this is the decision, this is who made it and why. So this template actually flips things from, if you think of like a normal research document that comes to a conclusion, like you're going to have all the why did we run this research, here's all the options we went through, here's the conclusions, and then the point is at the bottom. This flips it more like a headline of a newspaper where you don't want to bury the lead. It's this is the one proposal we're going to make, and we decided to do this, yes or no. It's not here's 15 choices. It's just one decision, yes or no, and it really simplifies that. So the template forces people to think in that way, which is a good habit for making decisions faster and not getting in the fatigue of looking at several different choices and trying to evaluate each one against each other. It's just, can this be made or not? And that's what this template tries to do.
Yeah, I love what you said about like not bearing the lead. I think oftentimes, everyone's sort of waiting for the punchline or the discussion. So that idea of like raising that up to the top and saying like, say the core of the point and let's get to that discussion resonates a lot. One of the other things that you said, especially when we first chatted, was you talked about how a lot of this was previously done synchronously in meetings, and part of this, like sort of this template and this idea, the sort of concepts and ideas behind it, helped you move that mostly asynchronous. And I wonder, so what percentage is now done asynchronously?
Yeah, we don't measure this precisely, obviously, but I would guess maybe that 90% of our decisions are actually done in these asynchronous documents. And we actually have a habit of being in a meeting and someone states an opinion, someone has a different opinion. We'll actually stop and say, one of you put this in a decision doc. They all know what to do. They go write it and they write up their version of the proposal. And then asynchronously, we can whether we think that proposal will work or not and decide. So it almost always ends up at this state, even if it starts in a synchronous conversation. And the nice part is once it goes that route, we have a log of every decision that's being made that affects other folks. And so if you want to be informed, you can just kind of see in our Coda docs all the decisions that are being considered and which ones have been made and which ones were abandoned because it didn't quite make sense. We moved on.
I love that. I love that. Can you talk a little bit about like how the decision log part of it gets used, sort of the historical view? Does that get used with like new people who join the company, or do you find yourself revisiting that type of thing?
Yeah, the main thing we use the log for is it holds people accountable because we force people to kind of write their name to, yes, I committed to this decision. And you don't see decisions being like rehashed a lot. That was an anti-pattern that I've seen in the past where people felt like the decision was made, but then somebody's like, can we revisit that decision? It's like once these documents are written and your name's there, there's a lot of social pressure to not go revisit that. You've already committed to that decision and no new information has changed. So it sort of holds people accountable to see that in that log that they've committed to it. And the other thing is, part of what makes decisions slow in other scenarios is you get a mix of people that want to be informed about a decision and kind of feel like they were involved, but they don't actually need to make that decision, or are they the right people to do it? And so by having this really transparent log, people can feel like they're involved in all these decisions that are happening and see what happened and see who said what and why. And it really drives a lot of transparency into all of our decisions.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It sort of relates to myth 3 that you have there, which is like mapping your stakeholders and being clear about sort of like who needs to be involved and why. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about just kind of the importance of like stakeholder management as a part of this, and any experiences or stories that come to mind there.
Yeah, so really the myth there is that all the stakeholders should have a chance to chime in on a decision. I think this is something, we're all consensus driven humans. Like, we want to drive consensus in the workplace, and you want everyone to be on your team, and you want people to feel bought in at the end, that they understood the decision, had a chance to chime in. But not everybody is equally impacted by a decision. Some people, you really do need their advice because they know more about this topic than you do. Maybe you are the decision owner and you need their insights early on as you're kind of thinking what you want to decide yourself and what you want to propose. And the most important stakeholders are the ones that have to commit. And by commit, it means they're going to dedicate resources, they're going to change something, they're going to help you do the work. And that's surprisingly rare how many people that ends up being. Like, if that's more than 5 people, then you probably haven't narrowed it down enough. The vast majority of people, you just want to inform. They want to feel involved and maybe like share some ideas along the way. And so that's how this kind of asynchronous thing helps, is they can see what's happening. And if somebody's like, hey, like, I randomly saw that this decision's up, I'm not one of the decision makers, but I can just give you feedback because I know this is something that you're working on. And sort of it opens up a level of communication that is very free flowing without muddying the water of like, oh, I have to talk to everybody in marketing and get them all bought in on my idea. Like, it's not a selling thing. There's a decision to be made, and some people need to make it. Everyone else can follow along.
Yeah, I like that. I like how it's like more of a scalpel than it is like the alternative is like going out and doing one-on-one meetings or doing group meetings with all those different stakeholders and trying to get their sort of consensus driven buy-in, like you said. But this is very like pointed. It's like you either need to be involved or you don't. You're welcome to follow along. We're happy to be transparent along the way. So
yeah, you asked for a specific example, and a funny one that came up is we were planning our offsite for our extended leadership team last winter, and it's one of those things that everybody's impacted that's attending this, and the people that aren't attending are impacted because they're not attending, and everybody has an opinion about where they're going to go for an offsite if you ask them. So we kind of fell into this trap of soliciting advice from everybody and kind of what would you do, and coming up with dozens of ideas. It was really hard to get to a final decision because it was like so many people felt like they had a say in that decision because of the way we approached it. So if you limit it to, hey, these 3 people are going to make a decision and they're open to advice, and then advice round is going to stop, and they're going to go off and do their decision because they know what the parameters are and what we need to solve for, and you can sort of follow along, it would have made that process a lot faster. So we ended up shifting gears from a discussion to putting it in a doc, and then obviously it went a lot better, a lot faster.
Nice.
We ended up going to Mexico.
Hopefully it was a good trip. Yeah,
that was fun. Yeah.
That's probably a good segue into myth 5, which is around disagree and commit. I think everyone's very familiar with language like this, disagree and commit, and it sounds great in theory. I wonder if you could maybe shed a little light on kind of how you do this in practice. One of the ways that you mentioned already is putting someone's name next to that concept of disagreeing and committing. But I wonder if you could, tell any stories or any experiences that come to mind.
Yeah, this one is something it takes some practice for people to get comfortable for saying I disagree and commit to this, because we want to be a part of the consensus on the other side too. Even when you disagree, you want to kind of get people to a place where you're all on the same page. But a lot of times, if you elevate it to this idea, is this safe to try? It's almost always yes. Like in the business place, there's very few times that you could say like, no, if you try this, all the servers might fall over and we seriously cannot try this. So often is this safe to try, or do we actually have a budget to do this or not? And you can make it a very black and white decision, be like, I don't agree that this is the best choice of action, but I'm not the core decision maker, and this proposal is probably safe to try and it might work out. I actually had this recently with another tech tool. Our team wanted to try linear. We're Jira users, and we're in the middle of a big project. And I said, this doesn't feel like the right time to be adding a new tool to our mix. If you fall in love with it, we're going to have to go through all this change management. So I actually said disagree, but I can commit to it. I'm not the core Jira user. I don't care. We do have budget. It's fine. So I disagree and committed, and actually it's going really well. They pleasantly surprised me. But you can go back and see why I disagreed and committed. And at the time, I'm still comfortable for why I did that.
Nice.
It's not whether I was right or wrong in a long term. It's, there was a reason and we committed and moved on.
Yeah, as the leader of the product org, it probably isn't a good system unless you can exercise the disagree and commit, model yourself. Yeah, that's cool. That's great. I guess anything else that comes to mind when thinking about decision making, any other stories that come to mind? Yeah.
Yeah, when we first rolled this out, it felt a little bit heavy-handed to some of the team because they were like, why do I have to go write this thing down? Like, can't we just jump in a meeting? And once we went through just a few weeks of iterations on this, and they saw how much faster it could be to actually get out of the meeting, write it down very clearly and succinctly, and then just get everyone to check off their boxes. So that was definitely a success pretty quickly, even though there was hesitation there. And one of the challenges, I think, if anyone uses this template, is because it is asynchronous, like people have a tendency to kind of get it buried in their inbox, or I'm going to go, think about that while I'm at the gym and forget to come back and actually check their name. So, or you can like put reminders in, or we actually have a team meeting every week where we check in on all the open ones. And it's just sort of an accountability thing, like, hey, it's Monday. These were from last week. Why haven't you checked your name? That's a good practice too, to just make sure if someone's holding out that it's usually just because they forgot or it got buried, not because they're actually like, in some waffling state on the decision.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I like that, like, there's sort of the async component, which is like the thoughtful writing part, thoughtful reading part, and then like there's some accountability when you're all together in a meeting. Yeah, that makes sense.
I think the best versions of this template that we have are the shortest too. Like the long ones take longer to chew. There's too much background, and it's the ones that are 4 sentences long or 2 sentences long that feel the best. They're the most clear, and they're the easiest to push through the process.
Yeah, I find myself asking, oftentimes I'll caveat ask about decisions with, just give me like the 3 bullet point version of what you want to do, and I don't want like to go off for a week and write a long doc. I want like the most succinct version. So that what you're saying really resonates with me too. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Well, thanks for creating the doc. Thanks for sharing a little bit about it. Really appreciate it.